What's the family secret that accidentally slipped out at a holiday dinner and ruined everything? For 19 years, my family had one unbreakable rule at Christmas dinner: never mention Uncle Theo. Every December 25th, we'd gather at my grandmother's Victorian house on Maple Street, the same mahogany dining table set with her grandmother's china. The empty chair at the head of the table was just part of the furniture now. Nobody questioned why we always sat 7 places, but only 6 people showed up. It was like a ghost lived with us, invisible but always present. Uncle Theo had moved to Europe for work when I was 3. That's what everyone said whenever his name accidentally came up, which wasn't often. Dad would get that tight look around his eyes, the same expression he wore when discussing overdue bills or visits to the dentist. Mom would quickly change the subject to safer topics like the weather or neighborhood gossip. My older brother Vincent would stare at his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. I'd grown up accepting this explanation without question. Kids do that. They believe what adults tell them because they have no reason not to. Uncle Theo was just this mythical figure who lived somewhere across the ocean, too busy with his important European job to visit or even call. I'd created an entire fantasy around him over the years. Maybe he was a spy. Maybe he was a famous artist. Maybe he was traveling the world, having adventures I could only dream about. This Christmas felt different, though. Grandma Rose had been acting strange all week, muttering to herself and calling me by my uncle's name, the early stages of dementia. Mom explained quietly when she thought I wasn't listening. We'd have to be patient with her confusion. Sometimes old people mixed up the present with the past. Sometimes they forgot which family members were still alive and which ones were gone. I'd noticed other things too. The way conversations stopped when I entered a room. How certain photo albums were kept on high shelves where I couldn't reach them. The locked bedroom on the 2nd floor that nobody ever went into. When I'd asked about it as a kid, Mom had simply said it was storage space for old furniture. During dinner, everything seemed normal at first. Dad carved the turkey with military precision, the same way he'd been doing since I could remember. Mom fussed over the side dishes, making sure everyone had enough stuffing and cranberry sauce. Vincent scrolled through his phone, barely participating in conversation. I helped Grandma with her napkin when her hands shook too much to manage it herself. The house felt heavy with history that day. 19 Christmases in this same dining room. 19 years of the same traditions, the same recipes, the same careful dance around topics we weren't supposed to discuss. The walls were lined with family photos spanning decades, but I'd noticed there were conspicuous gaps, years missing, faces that should have been there but weren't. Then Aunt Patricia arrived an hour late, slightly drunk and carrying a bottle of wine that cost more than my car payment. Patricia was Dad's sister, a successful real estate agent who lived alone in a downtown loft and dated men half her age. She had a tendency toward dramatic entrances and inappropriate comments, but the family tolerated her because she was blood. "Sorry I'm late," she announced, kissing everyone's cheeks with aggressive enthusiasm. Her breath smelled like she'd been drinking since breakfast. Traffic was murder getting here from the cemetery. The table went silent. Dad's carving knife froze mid-slice through the turkey breast. Mom's smile faltered like a mask slipping. Vincent actually looked up from his phone for the first time all evening. "Cemetery?" Mom asked carefully, her voice pitched higher than normal. Patricia looked confused, like she'd said something wrong but couldn't figure out what. She set the wine bottle down harder than necessary, making the glasses on the table chime against each other. "You know, visiting Theo's grave, like I do every Christmas morning. Don't tell me you forgot what day he died." The wine glass slipped from Vincent's hand, shattering against his plate. Red wine spread across the white tablecloth like blood, staining the fabric Mom had spent all morning ironing to perfection. "Patricia!" Dad said in a warning voice I'd never heard before. It was the voice he might use to tell a child to step away from a cliff edge, but Patricia was already opening the wine, oblivious to the tension crackling around the table like electricity before a storm. Or maybe she knew exactly what she was doing. Maybe 19 years of keeping this secret had finally become too much for her. 19 years today, she continued, struggling with the cork. "Can you believe it's been that long since the—" "Patricia, stop." Mom's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. That's when Grandma Rose looked up from her mashed potatoes, her watery blue eyes suddenly crystal clear. For a moment, the fog of dementia lifted, and she was completely present in the room with us. "Since Theo killed himself," she said matter-of-factly, "in this very house, right upstairs in his old bedroom." The cork finally popped free from Patricia's wine bottle. The sound echoed through the silent dining room like a gunshot. Nobody moved, nobody breathed. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly, marking seconds that felt like hours. I stared at my family, really looked at their faces for the first time. The guilt written in the lines around Dad's eyes. The shame in the way Mom couldn't meet my gaze. The carefully constructed lie that was crumbling around us like a house of cards. "He didn't move to Europe," I said slowly. It wasn't a question. Dad's face had gone gray, the color of old concrete. Mom was gripping her fork so tightly her knuckles were white. Vincent was staring at the wine stain spreading across the tablecloth like he was watching his entire world collapse in slow motion. "Sweetie," Mom started, but I cut her off. "He killed himself. In this house. And you've been lying to me for 19 years. Grandma Rose reached across the table and patted my hand with surprising gentleness. "It was Christmas morning," she said, her voice eerily calm, "just like today. He was only 17, same age you are now." The room started spinning. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to process what I'd just learned. My uncle hadn't moved to Europe. He'd been dead since I was 3 years old, dead by his own hand, in this house where we gathered every year to celebrate. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would you lie about something like that?" That's when Dad finally spoke, his voice barely audible. "Because it wasn't suicide." The words hung in the air like smoke. Patricia's wine glass slipped from her fingers, adding to the mess on the tablecloth. Mom made a sound like she'd been punched in the stomach. "What do you mean it wasn't suicide?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know the answer. Dad looked at Mom, then at Vincent. then back at me. There was a conversation happening in their glances that I couldn't understand. A whole language of guilt and fear and secrets that they'd been speaking for 19 years. Your uncle didn't kill himself, Dad said finally. Vincent killed him. Time stopped. The grandfather clock stopped ticking. The world stopped spinning. I looked at my brother, my quiet, phone-obsessed brother who worked at a software company and lived in a studio apartment and had never shown violence toward anything stronger than a video game character. Vincent had gone completely white. He was staring at his hands like he'd never seen them before. It was an accident, Mom said quickly, desperately. You have to understand. It was an accident. Tell her what really happened, Patricia said. She'd abandoned all pretense now, pouring wine directly into her mouth from the bottle. Tell her about the game. Patricia, please, Dad begged. No, Patricia slammed the bottle down. I'm tired of carrying this secret. I'm tired of pretending. I'm tired of watching you all lie to this girl every single day. She turned to me, her eyes bright with tears and alcohol. They were playing Russian roulette, she said. Vincent and Theo. Christmas morning 19 years ago. Vincent was 16, Theo was 17. They'd been drinking. That's enough, Dad roared, standing so abruptly his chair fell backward. And they found your grandfather's old service revolver in the attic. They thought it would be fun to play a game. They thought they were being brave. I couldn't breathe. The dining room felt like it was shrinking around me. Vincent spun the cylinder, Patricia continued relentlessly. Theo took the first turn. Nothing. Then Vincent. Nothing. Then Theo again. Nothing. They kept going, taking turns, laughing about it. Boys being stupid boys. Mom was crying now, quiet tears streaming down her cheeks. Then it was Vincent's turn, Patricia said. He put the gun to his own head and pulled the trigger. Click. Nothing. He handed it to Theo. Theo put it to his head. She paused, taking another drink. But Vincent had miscounted the chambers. Or maybe the cylinder hadn't spun properly. When Theo pulled the trigger, she didn't need to finish the sentence. I turned to look at Vincent, my brother, the person I'd shared a house with my entire life, the person who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework and never once mentioned that he'd accidentally killed our uncle. Vincent? I whispered. He finally looked up at me. His eyes were hollow, ancient. They were the eyes of someone who'd been carrying a terrible weight for half his life. I never meant for it to happen, he said, his voice cracking. We were just being stupid. We thought the gun wasn't loaded. We thought it was just a game. You killed him, I said. The words felt foreign in my mouth. It was an accident, Mom insisted again. A terrible, horrible accident. So, you covered it up, I said, understanding flooding through me like cold water. You made it look like suicide. Dad sat back down heavily, suddenly looking every one of his 52 years. We found them in Theo's bedroom, he said. Vincent was holding the gun, screaming. There was so much blood. He was gone instantly. We had to make a choice, Mom said. Call the police and watch our 16-year-old son go to prison for manslaughter or stage a suicide. I finished. It wasn't supposed to be permanent, Dad said quickly. We thought we'd let Vincent heal, let some time pass, then maybe tell people the truth. But days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Before we knew it, years had gone by and the lie had become our reality. I looked around the table at these people I thought I knew. My parents, who'd built their entire lives around protecting a lie. My brother, who'd been living with the guilt of accidentally killing someone since he was 16. My aunt, who'd been carrying this secret for nearly 2 decades. My grandmother, whose dementia had finally released her from the burden of keeping quiet. How did you explain the gun? I asked. We put it in Theo's hand, Mom said quietly. Made it look like he'd shot himself. The police didn't investigate too closely. Teenage suicide wasn't uncommon. They had no reason to suspect it was anything else. But you had to live with it, I said. Every day, Vincent said. His voice was barely a whisper. Every single day for 19 years. Do you know what that's like? Do you know what it's like to kill someone even by accident? To watch your parents cover it up? To live in the same house where it happened? Is that why you barely talk to us? I asked. Why you're always on your phone? Why you never seem present? He nodded. I can't be here without thinking about it. Every Christmas, sitting at this table, I see his face. I remember the sound the gun made. I remember the way he looked at me right before he pulled the trigger, like he was trusting me to keep him safe. And the locked room upstairs? I asked. That's Theo's room, Grandma Rose said. Her moment of clarity was fading, but she was still with us. We kept it exactly the way it was, like a shrine. Nobody could bring themselves to change it, Mom said. We just locked the door and pretended it didn't exist. I stood up from the table, my legs shaky. Everything I believed about my family, about my life, about my uncle, had been a lie. The uncle I'd fantasized about, the adventurous European I'd imagined, had been dead since before I could even form coherent memories. I need to see it, I said. What? Mom asked. The room. I need to see Theo's room. Absolutely not, Dad said firmly. You've lied to me for 19 years, I said, anger finally cutting through the shock. You've built our entire family around a lie. You owe me the truth, all of it. Patricia stood up unsteadily. I'll show her. Patricia, no, Mom pleaded. She deserves to know, Patricia said. She deserves to see who her uncle really was, not the fantasy you've let her create. We climbed the stairs in silence. The Victorian house creaked around us, settling into its bones the way old houses do. Patricia fumbled with a key ring, her hands shaking from alcohol and emotion. Your parents have been up here, she said as she unlocked the door. I know they have. Someone's been keeping it clean, but they've never let Vincent back in. Not once. The door swung open with a protest of hinges that hadn't been used in years. Theo's room was like stepping into a time capsule. A 17-year-old's bedroom, frozen in 2004. Posters of bands I'd never heard of covered the walls. A desktop computer that looked ancient by today's standards sat on a wooden desk. Clothes were still folded in the dresser drawers. A half-finished model airplane sat on the windowsill. But it was the bed that made my knees buckle. The comforter was different. Newer, cleaner. Someone had replaced the blood-stained bedding, but kept everything else exactly the same. He was going to join the army, Patricia said, her voice thick with wine and grief. After graduation, he wanted to see the world, have adventures. Ironic, isn't it? Your parents told everyone he moved to Europe, and that's exactly what he'd planned to do, just not the way it happened. I picked up a framed photo from the nightstand, a teenage boy with Vincent's eyes and my father's smile. He was wearing a baseball uniform, grinning at the camera with the kind of confidence that only comes from being 17 and believing you're invincible. He looks like us, I said. You have his laugh, Patricia said. Same exact laugh. It used to drive your mother crazy when you were little. She'd hear you laughing, and for just a second, she'd think she didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. Why Russian roulette? I asked. What made them think that was a good idea? Patricia sat down heavily on the desk chair. They'd been watching some movie the night before, something with Robert De Niro, The Deer Hunter, I think. There's a scene where they play Russian roulette, and Vincent and Theo thought it looked exciting, dangerous but manageable. They were teenagers. They thought they were smarter than they actually were. Where did they get the gun? Your grandfather's old service weapon from World War II. It was supposed to be unloaded, stored safely in the attic. But your grandmother had been hearing noises at night, probably just the house settling, and she'd asked your father to load it and keep it accessible just in case. So it was loaded. 1 bullet, in a 6-chamber revolver. The odds should have been on their side. I sat down on the bed, trying to imagine what had happened in this room 19 years ago. 2 teenage boys drunk on Christmas morning playing with death like it was a toy. What was he like? I asked. Patricia smiled for the first time all evening. Theo was electric. That's the only word for it. He had this energy that made everyone around him feel more alive. He was funny, smart, kind. He would have loved you so much. And Vincent? Vincent worshipped him. Theo was only a year older, but he might as well have been a different species. Everything Theo did was cool. Every idea Theo had was brilliant. When Theo suggested they play Russian roulette, Vincent didn't hesitate. Does Vincent blame himself? Every day. For 19 years. Your parents sent him to therapy, but he never really opened up about it. How do you tell a therapist that you accidentally killed your brother and your entire family covered it up? How do you process that kind of guilt? Is that why he never dates anyone seriously? Never seems to get close to people? Patricia nodded. How can you let someone love you when you know what you've done? How can you trust yourself not to hurt them too? We sat in silence for a while, surrounded by the ghost of a 17-year-old boy who died before I was old enough to remember him. The room smelled faintly of dust and old cologne. Late afternoon sunlight slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. What happens now? I asked finally. I don't know, Patricia admitted. The truth is out. There's no putting it back. Will Vincent go to prison? The statute of limitations has run out for most charges, and it was an accident, witnessed by family members who can testify to that fact. But the cover-up, lying to police, filing false reports, staging a crime scene, those charges might still be viable. Will you tell the police? Patricia looked at me with red-rimmed eyes. That's not my decision to make anymore. It's yours. The weight of that responsibility settled on my shoulders like a lead blanket. My family's future was now in my hands. I could destroy them all with a single phone call, or I could become complicit in the lie that had defined our family for 19 years. We went back downstairs to find the dining room empty. The dinner dishes had been cleared away, the wine-stained tablecloth stripped from the table. I could hear voices in the kitchen, my parents and Vincent speaking in urgent whispers. How long have you known? I asked Patricia. I was there that morning, she said. I'd come over early to help with Christmas dinner prep. I heard the screaming, saw Vincent holding the gun. I helped clean up the blood. You were part of the cover-up. I was 25 years old and terrified. My little brother was begging me to help save his son. What was I supposed to do? Tell the truth. Easy to say when you're not the one making the decision. We found my family in the kitchen. Mom was washing dishes with mechanical precision, her movements sharp and angry. Dad sat at the breakfast table with his head in his hands. Vincent leaned against the counter, staring out the window at the snow beginning to fall. Well? Dad asked when he saw us. How much does she know now? Everything, Patricia said. Mom's shoulders sagged. The dish she was washing slipped from her hands and shattered in the sink. She didn't even seem to notice. So what happens next? Vincent asked. He still wouldn't look at me directly. I don't know, I said honestly. Are you going to call the police? Mom asked, her voice small and frightened. I don't know, I repeated. We understand if you do, Dad said. We've been living with this secret for so long, maybe it's time for it to come out. Speak for yourself, Mom snapped. I'm not ready to watch my son go to prison for something that happened when he was 16. He killed someone, Linda, Dad said quietly. It was an accident. It was still a death that we covered up. We obstructed justice. We lied to police. We've been lying for 19 years. To protect our family, to protect ourselves, Vincent said, finally speaking up. Let's be honest about what we did. We protected ourselves. I looked at my brother, really looked at him. For the first time, I saw the man he'd become because of this secret. Quiet, withdrawn, unable to form meaningful relationships, living with guilt that had shaped every decision he'd made for half his life. How do you live with it? I asked him. You don't, he said simply. You just exist. You go through the motions of living, but you're not really alive. You're just surviving. Is that why you moved out as soon as you turned 18? He nodded. I couldn't stay in this house. Every room reminded me of what happened. Every family dinner was torture. Every Christmas was like reliving that morning over and over again. But you still came back. Every year. Because they're my family. Because despite everything, I love them. And because I owed it to Theo to be here on the anniversary of his death. Did you ever think about telling the truth? Every day. But the longer we waited, the worse it got. How do you call the police after 5 years and say, remember that suicide from 2004? Actually, it was an accident and we covered it up. How do you explain waiting 5 years to tell the truth? Or 10 years? Or 15? Or 19? Dad added. So you just kept lying. We kept surviving, Mom said. We kept our family together the only way we knew how. But we weren't together, I said. Don't you see that? We've been living like strangers for my entire life. Vincent barely talks to any of us. You and Dad walk around like you're carrying some terrible weight. I grew up feeling like there was this huge piece of our family missing, but I could never figure out what it was. The piece that was missing was Theo, Patricia said from the doorway. And honesty, I added. The piece that was missing was honesty. We stood in the kitchen, 5 people who'd been living with a lie for so long, we'd forgotten what the truth felt like. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering the world in white, clean, fresh, new. I need time to think, I said finally. Of course, Mom said quickly. Take all the time you need. But I can't pretend anymore. I can't come to family dinners and act like everything is normal. I can't live in a house built on lies. So, what are you saying? Dad asked. I'm saying that either we tell the truth, all of it, to everyone, or we stop pretending to be a family. The silence that followed was deafening. You're giving us an ultimatum, Mom said. I'm giving you a choice. The same choice you should have made 19 years ago. Vincent pushed himself away from the counter and walked toward the door. Where are you going? Mom asked. To pack, he said. If we're telling the truth, I need to get my affairs in order before I go to prison. You might not go to prison, Dad said. It was an accident. There were witnesses. I killed someone, Vincent said. Accident or not, there are consequences. There should be consequences. He paused in the doorway and looked back at me. For what it's worth, I'm glad you know. I'm glad someone finally forced us to stop living this lie. I've been dying slowly for 19 years. Maybe prison will be better than this. After he left, the 3 of us, Mom, Dad, and I, stood in the kitchen like survivors of some natural disaster. Everything familiar had been destroyed. Everything we'd built our lives around had crumbled. What do you want us to do? Mom asked finally. I want you to call the police, I said. I want you to tell them what really happened. I want you to face the consequences of your choices. And if we don't, then you'll never see me again. It was my turn to leave them standing there, processing the weight of an impossible choice. I drove home through the snow, my mind reeling. Everything I'd thought I knew about my family, about my life, about myself, had been rewritten in the space of a single dinner. I had an uncle I'd never known. I had a brother who was a killer. I had parents who'd built their entire existence around protecting a lie. And now I had to decide what to do with the truth. That night, I sat in my apartment, staring at my phone. I could call the police myself, end the lie once and for all, let justice take its course, whatever that meant. Or I could keep the secret, become part of the cover-up, carry this weight the way my family had been carrying it for 19 years. Neither choice felt right. Neither choice felt like justice. At 3 a.m., my phone rang. It was Vincent. I called them, he said without preamble. Called who? The police. I told them everything. They're coming to arrest me in the morning. I felt something like relief wash over me. The choice had been taken out of my hands. How do you feel? I asked. Scared, he said honestly, but also free. For the first time in 19 years, I feel free. What about Mom and Dad? They'll probably be charged too. Obstruction of justice, filing false police reports, tampering with evidence. But they made their choices 19 years ago. Now they have to live with the consequences. I'm sorry, I said. For what? For forcing this? For making you tell the truth. Don't be sorry. You did what the rest of us were too cowardly to do. You chose honesty over comfort. That takes courage. I don't feel courageous. I feel like I just destroyed our family. Our family was already destroyed, Vincent said quietly. It died the same day Theo did. We've just been pretending it was still alive. The next morning, I watched from my apartment window as police cars pulled up to my childhood home. I saw Vincent walk out in handcuffs. I saw my parents following behind him, also in custody. The story made the local news that evening. Family admits to covering up accidental death for nearly 2 decades. The reporter stood in front of our house, explaining how a teenage prank had gone tragically wrong and how a family had chosen to lie rather than face the truth. Vincent was charged with involuntary manslaughter and multiple counts related to the cover-up. My parents were charged with obstruction of justice, filing false police reports, and tampering with evidence. Patricia was charged as an accessory after the fact. The trials took months. I testified for the prosecution, telling the court what I'd learned that Christmas dinner. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done, standing in front of a judge and jury and explaining how my family had lived a lie for my entire conscious life. Vincent pleaded guilty to all charges. In his statement to the court, he said he was ready to face the consequences of his actions. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, with the possibility of parole in 3. My parents pleaded no contest and received 2 years each, most of which they served under house arrest due to their age and lack of prior criminal history. Patricia received probation and community service. The house on Maple Street was sold to pay for legal fees. Grandma Rose was moved to a memory care facility, where she's slowly forgetting not just the secret, but everything else too. I visit Vincent in prison once a month. He looks healthier than he has in years. The weight he'd been carrying for so long has been lifted from his shoulders. He's in therapy, finally dealing with the trauma and guilt he'd been suppressing for 2 decades. Do you regret it? I asked him during one visit. Telling the truth? Never. I regret the accident. I regret playing that stupid game. I regret not being strong enough to tell the truth 19 years ago. But I don't regret finally being honest. What about the consequences? This is better than the prison I was living in before. At least this one has an end date. My parents and I are slowly rebuilding our relationship. It's not easy. Trust, once broken, is difficult to repair. But we're trying to learn how to be honest with each other, how to be a real family instead of actors playing roles. On this Christmas, the first since the truth came out, we gathered at Patricia's apartment. It was smaller than Grandma's house, with no mahogany table or family china. But for the first time in my life, we talked openly about Theo. We shared memories and stories. We cried together. We grieved properly for the 17-year-old boy who died too young because of a stupid game. There was no empty chair at the table this year. Instead, we placed a photo of Theo in the center, surrounded by white candles. He was finally part of Christmas dinner again, not as a ghost or a secret, but as a beloved family member we'd lost too soon. Do you think he would have forgiven us? Mom asked, looking at his picture. I think he would have wanted us to tell the truth from the beginning, I said. I think he would have wanted Vincent to get help instead of suffering alone for 19 years. I think he would have wanted us to be a real family, Vincent added from the tablet screen where he was video calling from prison, not the broken, secretive people we became. It's been 2 years since that Christmas dinner changed everything. My family is scattered now. Vincent in prison, my parents in their small rental apartment, Patricia in her loft, me in my own place across town. But we're closer than we've been in decades. We talk regularly. We're honest with each other. We're healing. The truth destroyed the family we pretended to be, but it gave us a chance to become the family we actually could be. Sometimes I think about the alternative timeline, the one where Patricia never got drunk, where Grandma's dementia never caused her to speak up, where we all went on living the lie for another 19 years. In that timeline, Vincent continues to suffer in silence. My parents continue to carry their guilt. I continue to grow up feeling like something important is missing from my life. That timeline feels like death to me now. A slow, suffocating death where we all pretended to be alive while actually just existing. The truth was painful. The truth destroyed everything we'd built our lives around. The truth sent my brother to prison and my parents into disgrace. But the truth also set us free. And for the first time in my life, my family feels real.